don't know if you heard about this USAID debacle, but we're going to be discussing that today. I think this has a lot to do, or this really applies to our gun rights, and I'm going to explain that in a second. This USAID thing, and then also the Doge, which I'm so excited about. The USAID stands for United States Agency for International Development. Now, I don't know what we're doing developing internationally when we are crumbling here at home, but nonetheless, that's what this taxpayer organization stands for. Here's some examples of the waste and abuse. We got $1.5 million of, again, taxpayer money going to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, so DEI, in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. And then we got $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles for Vietnam, $47K for a transgender opera in Colombia, and then $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. $32,000 of taxpayer money. Oh, here's a good one. Hundreds of thousands of meals that went to Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria. So this USAID has been developing terrorist organizations. So that's where your taxpayer dollars are going. And what I find ironic about all of this is I've worked in government on both the federal and local level. And any federal building you go into, there's gonna be some corkboard somewhere in that building with a piece of paper on there that tells you to report fraud, waste, and abuse. And it has a hotline number. So you can call this number and apparently report waste, fraud, and abuse. So sounds like there has been a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse that's not been reported. As we can see by some of these numbers here, I don't understand why we have any interest in these things. We have our homelessness problem at home. We have issues with our roads and bridges that are crumbling. And yet we're putting $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Why are we funding tourism in Egypt? And so this brings me to the Doge. If you're not familiar, the Doge is the Department of Government Efficiency. And as far as I understand, it's not going to be an actual government agency. It's going to be separate from the government, but then they will advise on which government programs and organizations just should not exist and are not efficient. But there's this article from Wired where they talk about this, and they're saying the young, inexperienced engineers aiding Elon Musk's government takeover. I see it as a benefit that we have these young engineers who they're engineers, so they're good at critical thinking, are inexperienced. Because when I hear that inexperienced, I think they are not tainted by the government corruption that is the swamp of DC. Let's read some of this here. What we're seeing is unprecedented in that you have these actors who are not really public officials gaining access to the most sensitive data in government. Okay, here's the thing. They are not going to give people that do not have the appropriate clearance access to classified information. Now, what they're going to have access to is publicly available information that you can request as a citizen just because you're a taxpayer. So just like anyone can submit a Freedom of Information Act request on something that they're interested with government, I'm assuming that's how they're going to do this. But I just think it's funny how Wired is trying to say that these people are concerning to have some private organization looking into government, because apparently they think the government can look into themselves and fix the problem, which is not going to happen. But here's one of the people. He's been assigned by Elon to help look into these government waste, fraud, and abuse. So let's see what his experience is.
So I've always been interested in history. Growing up, I learned Latin. I was never that good at it, but I was always kind of into that sort of stuff, read a lot about the Roman Empire. And one day I was just listening to a podcast back in March. It was with Nat Friedman. He just kind of got on the podcast, explained like there are these burnt up scrolls that were buried in the Pompeii eruption. No one knows how to read them, but some professors have created CT scans of these scrolls, and they uploaded the data on the internet as a competition to see who could find writing inside of these scrolls. And when I heard that, I was just immediately like, oh my goodness, this is such a cool project. I have to work on this. I just went home from work that day at the end of the day, and I've been working on it evenings and weekends ever since. I run most of the things from my laptop. It's just a normal MacBook.
Already I can tell this is the kind of person that you want looking into government corruption. This kid likes to solve problems. He likes to find things and likes to analyze data, and he is willing to spend probably hours a day doing that.
I just spend hours upon hours staring at flattened pieces
like I said,
like this, trying to find these patterns, which are part of the writing. At the start of the challenge, we had not been able to find any writing at all within these scrolls. There are hundreds of these scrolls that are from the mansion. We've scanned a couple of them, and no one had been able to find any writing in them using these methods. Late one Saturday night, I was sitting at a party at a friend's house in Omaha, and I get a text from another person on the challenge team, and he says, "Hey, I've just uploaded this new kind of piece of the scroll. You should take a look at it." I remotely accessed my computer. I type into it like, "Please run the algorithm on this new piece of scroll," and then I just kind of started. I pull out my phone again, just nonchalantly, like, "Hey, I wonder how that went." And there are 3 Greek letters on the screen, the letters I'd never seen before.
Wow.
It was really cool because it's like, oh my goodness, like we actually detected new writing in the scrolls using AI. That was the moment I realized, like, this is actually going to work. Like, we're probably going to read the scrolls, and I completely freaked out.
Replace finding letters on a 2,000-year-old scroll with "I found some government waste, fraud, and abuse that now we can cut and save the taxpayers' money."
As a college student, it's definitely been overwhelming in the best way possible, but it's been really cool to get to kind of, talk about my findings and, share what I want to do in the future with so many people. So it's been overwhelming in the best possible way.
Yeah, this is definitely the type of person we need in our government. We don't need any more government bureaucrats that are just looking to do the bare minimum, get by, and secure their job for the next 20 or 30 years. We need problem solvers. We need people like this that have engineering backgrounds, STEM backgrounds. And what this also ties into this recent thing where President Trump ends the DEI madness and restores excellence and safety within the Federal Aviation Administration. So recently, we're aware that a Black Hawk helicopter crashed into a commercial airliner. It's just an absolutely horrible, awful event. And I'm not gonna say that those events were a cause of DEI, but whenever you prioritize race, whenever you prioritize gender, or some other thing that does not have to do with the job itself, is not based on that person's merit for that job, whenever you prioritize that for your hiring standards, you are already putting people at risk. When you're picking a doctor for some type of surgery, you don't look at the doctors, at least you probably don't look at the doctors and say, which doctor can I pick that's the most diverse? I want to make sure that the medical team that's working on my knee or working on my heart is a diverse team. No, you're picking the people that are the most qualified for that because it's very important. So whenever we have the FAA, we should be picking the most qualified people because we have a bunch of things flying in the air that could crash into each other, and physics don't care about race. When a plane crashes into a Black Hawk, it doesn't matter what the race is of the pilot, it doesn't matter what the race is of the air traffic controller. Again, I'm not saying that was the issue. I don't know the ethnicity, race, the sexual orientation of the air traffic controller, but nonetheless, this DEI crap, I'm so glad that it has come to DIE because it's enough. Like, it is not in the spirit of the civil rights movement where we vowed to judge people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin.
Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
We need to turn America back into a meritocracy where all that matters is whether or not you are competent at whatever job you're trying to acquire, not what color are you. Unless you're applying to be the lead role in some movie that's about a historical figure who was of a certain ethnicity or was a certain race. Like, obviously, I don't think it'd be a good idea to have a white man play MLK in a movie. But this DEI in government is, one, it's absolutely racist, and two, it's putting people's lives in danger. I saw this article, very retaliatory. The federal workers caught up in Trump's DEI purge. Employees condemn unprecedented and scary efforts to push out those who had worked on diversity programs. I don't understand what is so scary about getting racism out of government. Everything they accuse Trump of, they end up being. They accuse Trump of being racist, and yet they are in favor of racist hiring programs. Programs that will literally use someone's race or someone's gender to determine whether or not they can hire that person. Same thing with universities. Tying this all back into this channel and what we like to talk about here, which are self-defense rights, our responsibility as men to protect our families and our communities, there are a lot of people in government that want to suppress your right, and they don't care about the laws, they don't care about the Constitution, particularly in like the ATF. And so seeing this type of stuff gives me hope that those bureaucrats that just do whatever they want to do are going to be reined in. And I hope that there's a penalty for those people. Honestly, I hope some of them have to serve prison time because some of this stuff is absolutely criminal. If we go back to the USAID, $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. 2 million taxpayer dollars for that. Waste, fraud, and abuse. There it is right there. Every government building I've ever been in has something about waste, fraud, and abuse and how you can report it posted on the wall. But yet, apparently it never gets reported because we're just spending millions and millions. And how about the fact that the Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in the last 7 years? Imagine if you as a taxpayer could not pass an audit for 7 years. Actually, forget 7 years, 1 year. If you cannot pass an audit for 1 year, you were absolutely screwed. You will either go to prison or you'll have to pay a lot of money, but there's no way you'll have any leeway with the government, with the IRS, if you cannot pass an audit. And yet our Pentagon hasn't passed one for 7 years. The double standard that we have in this country, the two-tier system, and lawfare, I hope it's gonna go away. But there's a lot of things I don't like about Trump, but oh my gosh, there's a lot of things I like about Trump and a lot of things I like about the people he's picked. I think it's gonna be an interesting 4 years to say the least, and I think it's gonna put us in the direction that we need to go as a country. I think that we are on the brink of disaster. I think that if the election would have gone the other way, we may have witnessed disaster. I've said for years that I think tax day should occur right before election day. Not only that, but I don't like how your taxes are just taken out of your paycheck. I think everyone should have to send a check into the government or cash into the government for their taxes. So that way you see exactly how much you're paying. And it should be right before election day. The other thing is I think everyone should be made aware of exactly where their tax dollars are going. You should be able to request an itemized list of where your tax dollars went and what they were spent on. Now I get it, we have classified programs that need to be maintained secret because of national security, but if that's the case, then okay, put that down there. This was to fund some CIA program that you don't have access to, but let's have oversight on that program to say, yes, this actually was legitimate and not funding LGBT rights in some foreign country. I just don't understand why, as taxpayers, we are not made more aware of where our tax dollars are being spent. That needs to be reined in, and I think that the more people that are aware of where their taxpayer dollars are going, they'll start to vote differently, especially if it's right before Election Day. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, train to a higher standard.